If new old tech became available, would you buy it? Would you use it? Friends, if you haven't watched any of my revival series, then this video won't make any sense. I've put links in the description. That should fill the rest of your day. The theme of my revival series is that old technology has been superseded by new technology, and there's little point other than nostalgia in using vinyl records, cassettes, compact discs, analog tape in the studio, film photography and such. New technology is better, so why not use it to satisfy your urge to create and your urge to enjoy? I could state the essence of my argument this way. Suppose vinyl records had never been invented, and all there ever was streaming. If someone now invented vinyl records, would anyone want to use them? Would anyone want to make them? I could say the same about cassettes, analog tape in the studio, film photography. I might give compact disc a pass because it does have some advantages over streaming. Just not many. So what old technology could be invented or reinvented now? Something that fulfills a need that is already very adequately covered by digital, but isn't currently a thing in the analog domain. I'm going to say 16mm movie film. Yes, I know that's already been invented in 1923. But I'd like to invent a practical form of 16mm, something a YouTuber could use, something a YouTuber would use. So what's my new old 16mm going to look like? Well, one thing is certain, there won't be anything digital about it. That would be cheating. And more than that, if it's digital, then old diehards won't like it, and the whole point is that old diehards should like it. And so should trendy young hipsters. Hey, if it's good enough, maybe even I'll like it. Maybe I should go through this in levels, like my revival series. Yes, let's do that. Level 1, why 16mm? I've chosen 16mm as my new old format. Not 35mm, not 8mm, not IMAX, not CinemaScope, not VistaVision, not Super 8, Standard 8, Super 35, not any of the other many formats that have come and gone over time. Not even Thrillarama. Yes, that was a thing. For one film only. My feeling is that 16mm would offer a good compromise between cost and performance. 35mm would be too expensive, 8mm too low in quality. But 16mm isn't just 16mm. There's Super 16mm, which has a larger frame size because it only has one row of sprocket holes, where standard 16 has two, one on each side of the film. But I don't want to just accept Super 16 as it is. I think that with modern technology it can be improved. Actually, that's like a lot of the old formats, both audio and film. Development stopped when digital came along. Imagine how good analog audio could sound if development hadn't stopped around about 1980. So, Super 16 did away with one row of sprocket holes. Why not get rid of them both? I don't actually know how this can be done, but I think it can be done with 21st century motor technology. The purpose of the sprocket is to drive the film in a stop-start manner so that the film is stationary for each exposure. I bet that could be done with an up-to-date motor system. It can be digital if necessary, because no one's going to know. Without sprocket holes as a timing reference, I'll need a control track with sync pulses, which, because it's just binary, it can be very skinny. I'll come back to this later. So, yes, let's have a 16mm format that uses the full width of the film to achieve the finest quality results. Level 2, the film. I said that development of old technology stopped when digital came along. Well, clearly that's a simplification. Photographic film continues to be developed to give finer grain, better sensitivity, more accurate tone and colour rendering, or a more interesting look. All of that is good, but it could be better. Consider the number of people in the world who are clever enough to work at technology's cutting edge. What proportion of them work in digital technology and what proportion in analog? I bet that for every scientist working in Kodak's or Fuji's research labs, there are 100 working on Nikon's, Canon's and Sony's camera technology. So, even out that balance a bit, and I reckon film has a long way further it can go. In fact, it should be easy to make significant improvements just by taking up the slack of the last 20 years or so. 20 years wasted, some might say. So, if I consider the resolution of my camera right here in front of me, which is 3840 by 2160 pixels when shooting movies, I think that film 16mm wide with 21st century progress can match that or even better it. I'll throw in a fact that I've kind of half remembered from a long time ago. I was told by someone who knew people that know these things that they reckoned the ultimate resolution of a 35mm motion picture negative was around 4000 pixels across the width of the frame. Anything smaller than that was just grain. And that was back in the 1990s. Can 16mm film match that now? Maybe not, but I think it could if people wanted it enough. Level 3. Sound. It's well known that for every square metre of vision space in an outside broadcast truck, for instance, there are 10 square centimetres for sound. OK, I'm exaggerating a little, but where vision gets Millionaire's Row, sound gets a Tokyo apartment. But we have an opportunity to correct that. Sound for 16mm and for film in general is traditionally recorded to magnetic tape with the recorder separate from the camera. It might be connected by a sync cable, or they might both have a crystal so their speed is very accurate. I don't know about shooting sound directly onto 16mm or 35mm film, but I definitely do know that it was possible on Super 8, with of course the right camera and the right film stock. I've never heard it, but my guess is that with most of the film's width used for the picture, the sound didn't have very much room left to get a good signal-to-noise ratio. The film's speed in inches or centimetres per second was rather faster than compact cassette, so the frequency response might have been reasonably good. As for the stop-start motion of the film, that would have been compensated with a loop of slack. But even so, I suspect that there must have been significant flutter in the sound, and the thickness of the film base wouldn't have helped. For my new old-tech 16mm format, which I must think of a name for by the end of this video, I would have liked the sound to be recorded on the film, either magnetically or optically. And, of course, analogly. But I'm sceptical that it would be possible to get good enough results and not compromise the picture. So, sound would probably have to be captured on a separate medium, a separate analog medium. I could possibly imagine something similar to the compact cassette, brought up to date with 21st century technology. But I think that we have something already that could fairly easily be repurposed. The hard disk. Yes, the magnetic hard disk with spinning platters. Of course, as it exists at the moment, it's designed to record and store digital information. But the amazing packing density of modern hard disk technology, or call it hard drive if you prefer, could surely be repurposed to record analog audio. Maybe this wouldn't be in the same way as a tape recorder or cassette. Possibly it could use frequency modulation or something along the lines of quadrature amplitude modulation. But I think it could be done. I'm sure you'll tell me in the comments why it can't, if you think it can't. But in the entire history of technological achievement, how much has been achieved by pessimists? I mentioned earlier that the sprocketless film would need a control track with a sync pulse, and so will the audio recorder. Maybe the two control tracks could also include digital metadata, like date and time, GPS coordinates, all kinds of stuff, just like EXIF and IPTC metadata in digital photography. Or maybe this information could be stored analogically too. Or is that going a bit too far? Level 4. Digitizing. I don't know whether people use this word much anymore, but back in the olden days it meant transferring analog, video and audio into a digital editing system. In fact, when digital video became a thing, people were still calling it digitizing when the video and audio were already digital. So for my new super duper 16mm system, I'll need a digitizer. This is like where film photographers use a digital scanner or reshoot their negatives with a digital camera. But I'm thinking more analog than that. If we go back in history to when film was film and television was live or analog video, then film was transferred to video or broadcast live using a telecine. I remember researching and writing about telecine back in the 1990s, and what I learned was that these were, and still are, tremendous machines in technology, capability, size, and price tag. But the early telecines were, believe it or not, entirely analog. No digits involved because they hadn't been invented. So my thinking goes, why not use analog technology to scan my 16mm negative? Reshooting the negative with a digital camera or scanning it with a digital scanner, like film photographers do today, is just too digital. And that's me saying that. No, I'm going for something like the flying spot. If you think of an old-fashioned cathode ray tube television displaying only the raster with no image, then you focus that raster onto the film frame, you can measure the brightness of the light that shines through as the spot moves and convert it into an analog voltage. Okay, simplifying, but it's known and established technology, ripe for bringing up to 21st century standards. Yes, ultimately that analog voltage signal will have to be digitized for editing, but everything up to this point has been firmly in the analog domain. Old tech, but new. Level 5, practicality and affordability. Almost anything is possible if you spend enough money on it. So yes, I believe that it would be possible with 21st century technology and a bit of further development to have a motion picture recording system that uses 16mm film, with sound that performs as well as my digital camera here, all in the analog domain right up to the very last moment before entering my video editing software. If this would be mass market, I don't see why the equipment would have to be so much more expensive than digital technology. The cost of the film stock would be an issue, particularly considering how many fluffs I make that are going to end up literally on the cutting room floor. But adding it all up, I suspect that this endeavour would be so costly that it could never get off the ground. Which is a shame, because despite my comments earlier in my revival series, vinyl records, cassettes, compact disc, analog tape in the studio and film photography are all still available and going relatively strong. It's just analog movie making that's missing. Unless your name's Christopher Nolan, of course. So I'm going to leave it to my resourceful band of commenters. What have I missed out? What could be done in a better way than my suggestions? Will we ever see analog movie making become popular again? Your call. I still don't have a name for this. Any suggestions? See you soon.